These idyllic scenes of destroyers at anchor in Scapa Flow are far removed from the hazardous conditions they face when escorting convoys through to Russia. And in compiling this program episode, I have made no attempt to portray a definitive history of that subject, preferring to keep to my usual format of presenting with an absolute minimum of complimentary dialogue certain events as they actually happened. The task would have been made much easier had there been available a certain amount of archive film of this emotive subject, but sadly this is not so, for very few cameramen were disposed to making that highly dangerous journey. However, later in this program we will feature one such convoy which was filmed, enabling us to witness its real-life drama unfold. Added to this, I have also incorporated rare Russian, German, and private archive film, which will all serve to highlight the ever-present dangerous hazards which were associated with Russian convoys. The responsibility of protecting Russian convoys lay with the home fleet, whose CNC was initially Admiral Tovey, about to be seen here inspecting a KG-5 class battleship. In mid-1942, the home fleet was briefly reinforced by units of the U.S. Navy, as the following newsreel will reveal during the occasion of a visit to Scapa Flow by King George VI.
It was grey northern weather when the British home fleet lay at anchor to receive the visit of His Majesty King George VI. The King's first call afloat was on the battleship Duke of York, the flagship. These are the ships whose vigilance keeps the German Navy penned in. Aboard the cruiser Norfolk, the King was presented by a petty officer with a miniature replica of a naval hat, which he had made. On HMS Tyne, the King saw proof that enemy-occupied countries are still fighting. Dutch sailors are serving on this man of war. men of a race born no less than the British to seafaring and liberty. But most significant was the United States flag, flying in these waters for the second time in a generation and against the same enemy. Admiral Stark is commander of the United States Naval Forces operating in the European area. Among the officers on this United States battleship is a surprise link with Hollywood, Lieutenant Douglas Fairbanks. On a United States cruiser, King George was received by Rear Admiral Giffin in command of this squadron. At sea as on land, the United Nations are marshalling an invincible force.
For obvious geographical reasons, Iceland was an important location for the disposition of Allied shipping, and here in Halvafjord are views of the American cruisers Wichita and Tuscaloosa and the battleships Idaho and Mississippi. The later, more distant views are probably the Sheffield, Victorious, Suffolk, Kenya, and Kent, ending with a camera pan of the KG-5. Providing a constant threat to the Russian convoys were the German warships based here in Altenfjord, Norway. Tirpitz, Scharnhorst, Hipper, Lutzow, and the Admiral Scheer, seen here about to prepare for sea as the Tirpitz passes abeam. Whenever any of these units put to sea, it usually spelled much trouble for merchant shipping, as will be highlighted by this dramatic footage filmed from the Admiral Scheer.
Eintragen ins Gefechtstagebuch, Kontakt übernommen.
Umgedachtstellung. Yes. Wir sind kein gewöhnlicher Dampfer.
Und die natürlich alleine sind. Schaffen wir eine Begleitung.
Ich kann nicht die Kapitän.
These are views of German destroyers. They were larger and more heavily armed than their Royal Navy counterparts, and shortly we will see them in action via a contemporary German newsreel.
Kurs 72 Grad, beide Maschinen machen große Fahrt voraus. Kurs 72 Grad, beide Maschinen machen große Fahrt voraus. Lichtkontrolle OB.
Deutsche Seestreitkräfte an der Küste vor Narva im Kampf mit sowjetischen Geschützstellungen. Auch die Männer im Maschinenraum stehen im Gefecht. Jetzt hängt viel von der Höhe ihrer technischen Ausbildung ab. Sie haben die Kräfte zu meistern, die in den Schiffsmaschinen liegen.
With the increase of her forces in Norway deployed against Russian convoys, Germany had to organize her own convoy system of supply. Equally assured were the hazards of severe Arctic weather. One particular hazard which continued to plague the home fleet until being sunk off North Cape in December 1943, as detailed in a previous episode, was of course the Scharnhorst, about to be seen proceeding majestically through the pack ice on one of her forays into the Arctic seas.
Anfang G64.
It is possible that U-boats were the most feared hazard of any merchant seaman, for suddenly, without any prior warning, their ship could be fatally hit by torpedo, and to find oneself cast into those icy seas meant rapid death by exposure. Yet even the U-boat crews themselves faced appalling weather conditions, and as we will see, their hazardous operations did not go unnoticed by their beloved Commander-in-Chief, Admiral Karl Donitz. One other great peril for the convoys was, of course, the Luftwaffe, and being able to operate from bases close to convoy routes, it did have a telling effect, which will be later highlighted. And now, finally, we turn to the convoys themselves, and being based primarily on PQ-18, with almost all the official surviving archive film I could find, I will attempt to portray for the viewer the actual experience of a convoy being beset by all the previous outlined hazards, commencing with the actual loading of those much-needed wartime supplies to Russia.
Take the weight.
Down. Right up. Down.
It was September 2nd, 1942, after assembling at Loch Ewe, that the 40 merchant ships of PQ-18 sailed with a light escort and headed north through the Minches towards the Outer Hebrides. And in view of the disaster which had befallen the previous convoy, the infamous PQ-17, this one would be joined off Iceland by the largest through escort than anything previously seen, being 16 fleet destroyers drawn from the 3rd, 6th, 8th, and 15th flotillas. Of the 4 Treiber-class destroyer escorts from the 6th flotilla, HMS Somali would be sunk by torpedo with a loss of 45 officers and ratings. In addition to the large fleet destroyer escort were 4 corvettes, 4 trawlers, and 3 minesweepers.
Blimey, have we got a right bunch? for this position.
Very good, sir.
Boss, you're on fire, sir. Signal our position. Tell them to keep a sharp lookout. Sir.
Off Iceland, the convoy would also be joined by the escort carrier Avenger and the shortly to be seen anti-aircraft cruiser Scylla, flying the flag of Rear Admiral Bob Burnett.
Attention on the upper deck, face to starboard. Special sea duty men, close up!
Full gales. All the way from Iceland right down to the Bay of Biscay.
This is HMS London, and along with the two cruisers we have just previously seen, namely the Suffolk and Norfolk, they sailed from Iceland to give distant cover to the north of the convoy, while to the south it would be provided by the Duke of York, Jamaica, and 5 destroyers. With the Scylla now having joined the through escort, the convoy sailed towards the dangerous waters of the Barents Sea, and henceforth all crews would need to be on constant alert.
Do you hear that? Ship will assume second degree readiness in 15 minutes' time.
Well, enjoying the weather?
Yes, sir.
The weather was, of course, a particular hazard in these northern latitudes, yet it did have the dubious benefit of usually affording some respite from the enemy. In such severe conditions as this, life aboard small ships was especially difficult. These adverse conditions were shared equally with the enemy, and U-boats did need to surface and recharge their batteries. Understandingly, merchant ships did sometimes become detached from the convoy lanes, and quite often with fatal results. 3 merchant ships of PQ-18 were sunk by U-boats, but 2 of their own number were destroyed by the flotilla leaders Onslow and Faulkner. After the U-boat hunt, the destroyers quickly rejoined the convoy, and as the force sailed steadily east towards Kola, it was about to undergo one of the most savage convoy air attacks of World War II, and 10 more merchant ships would be sunk.
Bearing 042, range 1,500 yards.
Have the hands close up in 10 minutes.
Stop by below.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that? All hands assume first degree readiness in 10 minutes' time.
Here they come. My God, there are droves of them.
Stand by to repel enemy aircraft.
Sound off action stations at the double.
Sound the alarm.
Bugler!
9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
Blimey, here we go.
Not long now. Keep it calm.
My God, look there. Look there. There.
From the bridge of Scylla, the C&C gazes with horror at the appalling cloud of smoke from one of the ill-fated merchant ships, being the American Mary Luckenbach. Carrying a cargo of ammunition, she had disappeared in a flash along with the lives of 40 men after being hit by a torpedo bomber. Incredibly, one survivor was picked up some half-mile distant.
Do you hear that? Do you hear that? Minesweeper Harrier is coming alongside to transfer survivors. Starboard watch of seamen muster on the forecastle.
Right, you ready to go? You clear? Yeah, looking good. Right, I'm ready. Stand by. We're going to go, yeah? Hold my line out and I'll get below the bar. Steady, steady. All right, just be having you. Come on. Take it easy, I've got you. Come on, hold on. Aye. Now the gun ain't for you. Ready? Come on. Keep it calm. Get the move. Hold it, Eb.
Later, another minesweeper, HMS Sharpshooter, would also come alongside and transfer even more survivors, but I could find no footage of that event.
You hear there? If no further attack is made in the next quarter of an hour, action metting groups will send a rating to the galley for tea when piped.
All the nice girls love the sailor. All the nice girls love the tar.
Lookouts called the Bugle Command, with extra ones now being supplied by the American survivors. They were soon to see the enemy again. This second attack was far less sustained, and the force suffered no further losses, which greatly pleased the CNC. The destroyer Milne was signaled to close alongside, to which he would now transfer his flag, with the Scylla about to be detached and proceed at full speed to Iceland, with her now extra complement of some 200 merchant seamen.
Everything ready? Yes, sir. All right, we will.
Goodbye. Good luck.
From the Milne, Burnett would now transfer his forces to the homeward-bound convoy QP-14, which consisted largely of the few surviving ships from the infamous PQ-17, while PQ-18, having now reached safer waters, continued east with a much reduced escort. However, it would skirt the pack ice to ensure a greater degree of safety.
Starboard watch of seamen, muster on the forecastle.
Keep at it.
What a carry on, isn't it?
Nice one.
This is luxury, isn't it? I'm glad I came now.
Yeah. Just another pleasure cruise.
I wouldn't have missed this for anything on earth.
Oh, let's get some sea service in. Right, up it.
Have you seen any ice yet?
All lookouts close up.
Weather doesn't look too promising, does it?
Truly, this is the most damnable place on earth.
Refueling at sea was always a problem for the escorts, and on Russian convoys, it was usually provided by Admiralty fleet tankers of the Ranger class. In conditions such as this, a hot mug of Pusser's Kai would be a welcome relief during the middle watch. Having been at sea for 16 days, the surviving ships of PQ-18 make their way slowly towards Cape Cannon at the entrance to the White Sea, where, even after such a harrowing voyage, the arrival ports beckoned with no great delight, being particularly cold and inhospitable. To the surprise of the convoy, they were suddenly joined by the rare appearance of 4 Russian destroyers. Certainly in the history of Russian convoys, it is widely accepted that the Soviet Navy was more conspicuous by its absence. But what now follows is part of a wartime program purporting to show the opposite. I was unable to identify the convoy code number, but the leading destroyer seen is HMS Obedient.
В составе каравана и советские транспорты. Их ведут самые опытные командиры. Капитан Гаврилов плавал на всех океанах и морях земного шара. Вдали от наших берегов караван встречают эсминцы Северного флота. Непрерывно сигнальщики наблюдают за воздухом. Замечены вражеские бомбардировщики. Боевая тревога. Под охраной кораблей Северного флота караван продолжает свой путь в порт назначения.
For the men who fought those convoys through to North Russia, they would find little comfort in those bleak ports of arrival, and were only too happy to quickly sail again for home waters, where even Scapa Flow seemed like paradise by comparison. For a few others, their assignment kept them in the region for longer periods, and a letter from home took on a more significant meaning. Certainly scenes of fraternization we are now watching would have been the exception rather than the rule, for generally British crews were more inclined to be treated with suspicion as opposed to open friendliness. Of the convoys, there would be 21 more sailings after PQ-18, but none would ever undergo such savage air attacks again, and in fact, in that total, only 3 merchant ships would be lost. Long since passed on at the breakage yard are most of the veteran ships associated with the Russian run, and even though the memory of those times belongs now only to a dwindling band of men who sailed those dangerous waters, the saga of those Russian convoys will long remain in the annals of this country's maritime history.